Good evening and welcome. This is Altazar, professional astrologer, welcoming you to the next installment of my series on astrology as a tool for spiritual growth and healing. This series has followed a number of different topics, including the father wound. Tonight's topic is the mother wound. Key to emotional awareness and healing as revealed by the moon's position in one's astrology chart. So welcome to those who are here for this presentation. Should be interesting and exciting. I am just hoping that my internet connection remains solid throughout, as I've had a little erratic connection lately. At any rate, we're going to talk about the mother wound tonight in varying perspectives. And so you'll see from here that I have a list of the breakdown of tonight's topic. We're going to be starting out by talking about the mother wound as it's exhibited by our Western patriarchal capitalistic society. And we're not going to dwell on that very long because we want to get into more revelations that affect you personally. But that'll be a beginning theme. We're going to also look at qualities of the attributes of a good mother. Welcome, Victoria, and welcome, Lynn. Glad to have you here tonight. And we'll also look at the skills that one may acquire from having the more ideal mother, so to speak. And then we're going to look at the characteristics of the mother wound, or how mother may have not been fully there in the idealistic capacity, and that behavior associated with it. And then we're going to look at the impact of the mother wound. And so these four sections are going to be brief, and we're going to move through them so we get a perspective on what I'm talking about here in terms of the mother wound. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time looking at the astrological moon positions as they might exist in your astrology chart, and is symbolic of varying levels of karma that you may have associated with your mother, or why you chose that mother in this lifetime to recreate certain gifts and talents you have, as well as healing issues, to evolve a deeper emotional awareness and empathy. So I welcome those who've just arrived, and we're going to get into talking about the mother wound and the various aspects of the mother wound that I've listed here on the board. I will mention that this video will be recorded and available to watch in the future on my YouTube channel, Altazar Astrology. So if you go to YouTube and search Altazar Astrology, you'll find all of my videos, including those on the father wound and on romance and sex addiction, and on things like astrolocation and astrocartography, as well as horoscopes. So you're also welcome to check out my website, www.altazarastrology.com, for a complete listing of all the different types of readings that I do. And my background is listed there too, but I'll just briefly summarize that for those of you not familiar with me. I've been an astrologer for almost 30 years, and in the course of that time, I've studied the whole range of perspectives on astrology, from the ancient Hindu Vedas to Chinese astrology, the Buddhist perspective on karma and reincarnation, as well as the Western point of view on psychological and character expressions through astrology. Also, I have worked in astrology in terms of mainly the spiritual point of view as to healing and personal growth. So I'm going to just give you a brief summary of the spiritual perspective that I employ in terms of an astrology chart's interpretation. That life is a school in which we're here to evolve our consciousness to higher and higher levels of awareness of the meaning of spiritual principles that, when inculcated in our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, yields greater and greater levels of harmony, happiness, peace of mind, prosperity, and loving relationships in our lives. It is said that we live many lifetimes, or what's known as reincarnation, in order to evolve our souls in this school towards greater attunement with the principles of universality and love. One's astrological chart is said to be one's spiritual report card in the school of life, summarizing one's karma and therefore indicating where one has potential gifts, talents, and natural abilities that are earned from that positive karma, and where one may have blocks, frustrations, or difficulties. Just for those who are not familiar with an astrology chart, just briefly going to show you an astrology chart. This is the chart of Bill Clinton. And so an astrology chart consists of all the planets from the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, all the way out through Pluto. And they're in signs, and every sign consists of 30 degrees. And the signs and the planets are in different angles. And all of these positions, including these wedges, which are called houses, represent varying levels of a person's expression, karma, healing, personal growth, gifts, and talents. But tonight, we're going to be focusing on the moon. And so the moon position in a person's chart, and how that moon position is a summary of a person's karmic character and personality and predominant theme of expression from many lifetimes. Many people think their sun sign is the core of that, and it might be in alignment with the moon. But it's actually the moon that is the residue and the cumulative sensibility of experience that one has predominant from many lifetimes, and therefore also is indicative of how a person takes care of their needs and feelings, relates to their environment, their home and family, how they express their personality, and as well how they are experienced in relating to the what's known as self-care in regards to a person's body and hygienic and health issues. So we'll get a little more into that when we look at each of the signs later in this presentation. But now we're going to move on to number one here. The mother wound, as it's more on a macroistic level. We're all part of Western capitalistic patriarchal society. And how is the mother wound associated with this Western society? Well, the ancient Vedas and the Hindus have looked at time in terms of thousands of years, and there are blocks of time that are associated with different types of themes in regards to the evolution of humanity. And we are in what is called the Kali Yuga. That's a block of time that the Hindus and the ancient Vedas consider one of the most darkest and challenging periods of time in the evolution of humanity. Sorry to say, but if you look at the 20th century and the millions upon millions of people who were killed in wars and other types of events, you can see that was not an easy time. So the Kali Yuga and the societal reflection of the mother wound is related to the denial of needs and feelings and an attunement with nature. A lack of empathy and a lack of trust in the supportive dynamic of community through peace and harmony. So that's a mouthful, but just let me say this, that some of the symptoms of our mother wound society are our factory school systems, anything that relates to evolving needs, feelings, and awareness, emotional awareness. Schools are improving, such as Montessori schools and other more evolved consciousness approaches to education. But largely in the 20th century, we had the standardization of schooling of children, regardless of whether the child is a gifted, sensitive musician or artist, or whether they were here to be an engineer. Everyone had the basic reading, writing, arithmetic, and if there was shortage in the budget, the first things that would go would be the arts and music and the refined dynamics. Also, we look at the inclination and the organization of society towards productivity versus collectivity. So even our streets and all the right angles in society encourage being busy and productive, to manage your to-do lists and become a human doing rather than a human being. So the encouragement of self-reliance and rugged individualism and isolation versus community and collectivity. Another is the privatization of healthcare for profit over humane collective consideration for the preventative orientation towards improving health. Prevention of disease versus profit, which encourages disease and pharmaceutical and drug companies to exploit the further representation of the mother wound in society, which is the for-profit food system, and the production, the factory production of everything from chickens and cows to our vegetables, fruits, and others that have been contaminated with chemicals and pesticides and soil depleted, all lending towards the degeneration of health, increase of cancer, and supporting and fueling the for-profit pharmaceutical and drug industry as well as the medical system. So these are all symptoms of how personal needs and emotional well-being are not cared for in this society. And we also see the destruction of the environment through pollution and in consideration, as well as an arrogant sense of mastery over nature that is promulgated by certain political and conservative and or even religious groups in this society. So, and even religion versus spirituality is another symptom of the cerebral dogmatism that has gone into religion versus encouraging spiritual practices that get one into a greater attunement with one's heart and a center towards an intuitive awareness to be guided towards a healthy existence. So that's my summary of the mother wound in regards to society. And now we're going to move into looking at the characteristics of the good mother. Now this is idealistic, so and this could apply to a man who is in the mothering role in a family situation as well. But this is just to give a higher perspective on what are attributes related to the good mother before we get into the kind of mothers we had. So fundamentally, studying spiritual literature, everything from the Bible to the Vedas to the Buddhist treatises, the good mother is a mother who works towards spiritual and personal growth. That's the foundation. And a mother who is oriented towards centering herself in her heart and evolving towards a greater love towards the universe, God, Buddha, nature, or in Native American spirituality, the love of the native mother. And then as a result of that foundation that has an inner moral compass and an inner wisdom that is centered in the present moment, the good mother is caring, nurturing, emotionally available, honestly communicative, relaxed, compassionate, is an active parent, positively authoritative, a good role model, professionally balanced with a career or job, as well as available in an unstressed way for home and family. Another way to put it is present and sober. And as well, a homemaker, health conscious, available in a social way, creative, possibly artistic, tactful and diplomatic, and a good and active listener. So these are, higher standards to look up to, and we all may evolve towards or emulate. But now we're going to just talk about to what extent did you experience, or did your mother give you skills for the following? And before I even continue with this idealistic mother or the skills that mother may have given you or not, this presentation is not meant to be an indictment of our mothers. Believe me, our mothers have done the best they could given the very challenging structure of this patriarchal, nature-denying, productivity-oriented, mother-wound, societal capitalism that we live in. So, mothers did the best they could in this circumstance. And fundamentally, we are all called to forgive our mothers because they are only a reflection of a side of ourselves that we have chosen to evolve and heal in this lifetime. So with that said, I love my mother and I forgive my mother. May she rest in peace. Did your mother give you skills for emotional empathy, vulnerability? Was she a role model for personal hygiene and health practices and nutritional awareness? Was she positive in terms of her sociability? Did she have friends? And did she relate to the public in some political or humanitarian way? Was she creative or artistic and encouraged those creative outlets for you in your life? Did she have a romantic side to her? Was she or he involved in relationships that modeled a loving expression? Did she display and explain healthy sexuality? And was she and did she have a career, or was she aware of how to be healthily balanced in terms of career and home life, and know how to set goals and evolve ambitions in life? So these are some of the skills that mother may or may not have given, but this again is the idealistic good mother. Excuse me. And now when we get into the signs, the moon signs, I do want to point out that, and from my own experience, given that I have two older sisters, that the experience you had with your mother or your father may not be the same experience and or same type of karma that your siblings had with the same parents. I've analyzed the charts of many people, including their mothers and their fathers, and then the children, including their brothers and sisters. Some people may have just a very positive and largely harmonious experience with their mother. Whereas another child may have had somewhat of a miserable or difficult experience. So every chart is unique, and you can't compare your chart even with your brothers or sisters in regards to the same parent. So with that said, I'm just going to ask some evocative questions here to think about before we get into talking about the signs of the mother and the moon. So here are some questions to think about in regards to your mother. Did your mother breastfeed you? As one of the earliest kinds of experiences, that some sense of bonding and nurturing many have had or not. Did your mother hug and kiss you? Did mother nurture you when you were sick? Did she take care of herself when she was sick, or was she on the run anyway? Did your mother cook? And how did she relate to food? And as well teach you about food or nutrition or not? Did your mother clean house, and was she hygienic, and did she give you some sensibility about that organization of the home environment? Did your mother ask you about your day when you came home from school? Did she ask you about your friends, how you felt about things? Friends, school, teachers, activities? Did your mother share about her life, her own life and her interests? Was she somewhat at least open, not in a way that is not understandable for a child, but just showing an example of what she does and who she is? Did your mother encourage your dreams or ambitions? Or did she not even care? Or did she not even understand you and maybe encouraged you to be something else that you had no interest in being? My mother often talked about my becoming an accountant or a scientist or an engineer. So that didn't bode well with me at the time when I was thinking of becoming an astronaut. But anyway, did your mother teach you about money and savings and budgeting? Did your mother show an interest in teaching you about the realities of living? Not just what you learn in school, but, just how to deal with neighbors and get a job or write a resume, put your life together, and how to date and be involved in social connections. And did your mother have friends, and how did she behave with those friends? Did she gossip about them behind their back? Did she belittle them or talk openly about resentments? How did your mother treat the hired help? For example, if you had a house painter over, a plumber, someone who landscaper or whatever, was your mother cordial, or was she condescending or arrogant and just to belittle people who were maybe lesser than her on the sociological scale? Did your mother have verbalized prejudices towards races or religions? Did your mother have social events in the home and teach you how to engage or organize those kind of social events? Did your mother display appropriate affection to your father or to her significant other? Did you move a lot during your childhood? In other words, move houses, or did your mother or father have careers that involved moving, like in the military, and that caused disruption and constant reorganization of the home and new friends and associations? Were you left alone for extended periods of time, such as even to make your own dinner, or left TV dinners if mother had to work at night? And you can even reflect on how you were potty trained, if you can even remember, and was that a shameful experience? Did your mother share emotions and fears that were inappropriate to be shared with children, and what more contemporary psychologists call emotional incest, where a mother or father shares fears, anxieties, or resentments about adult situations with a child? Were your parents sexual inappropriately in front of young children or yourself? So you can see I've kind of asked a bunch of questions that start from, healthy considerations to somewhat degenerate situations. And so now I'm going to move to talking about the mother wound signs and planets. So I wonder how many of you have had an astrology chart. I know some of you who are apparently here have had an astrology chart and know your moon position. So, and that means knowing what sign your moon is in. So just like your sun sign, you might be a Pisces or an Aquarius or whatever of the signs, the 12 signs, the moon position is also in one of these 12 signs. And so this is fundamentally an expression of how you have been expressing your identity and emotionality and empathy through lifetimes. So what I'm going to do now is move on to talking about the hard signs. So I'm going to start with the signs that karmically represent the moon's position and those signs that are the most challenging. So, the three signs that are considered most karmically challenging, that is, that if you have your moon in one of these three signs, that you have more of a karmic challenge just in general than people who have their moon in another of the signs. And or if you have the moon in one of these other signs, however, it's in what we call a hard aspect to these planets, then you also have a more challenging karma in regards to the moon. So let's talk about that. We're going to start with Aries and Mars. So in other words, if you have the moon in Aries, and or you have the moon in some other sign, but it's in an adverse angle to the planet Mars, that means a square or an opposition. That means as follows, that first of all, the moon in Aries implies a mother who is very busy and active. Now, not all people who have moon in Aries have, too much of a challenging issue with their mother, but it does imply that mother, Aries is a masculine sign, it's a masculine energy. And the more favorable positions for the moon, like in Libra, Taurus, Cancer, Sagittarius, or Pisces, are more feminine or positive in their energies and emotional empathy. So someone with the moon in Aries has had a mother who may have been very busy, active, physically driven, such as sports or recreational activities. She may have as well been very career-oriented and not very really happy in the mothering role. She may have been dutiful in terms of providing for food, shelter, and clothing as she was on the run to back out to do either her physical exercises or her career activities or other social associations. In that light, she still may have been positive in terms of being someone who is driven and takes initiative in life. So if you have a moon in Aries, this does imply you have a predominance of past lifetimes of being a kind of activist and someone who takes initiative and has a drive for leadership and can be somewhat independent, self-reliant, and a pioneering spirit. And to some extent, somewhat of a loner or highly independent. Now, where there is a problem is when there are hard aspects to the moon, such as squares or oppositions. So if you have moon in Aries and you have a square in opposition, it implies the mother wound in which mother may have been excessively demanding of you. She may have been overly busy and harried in her existence. She may have been rather aggressive and contentious, even combative, or have a loose temper. And in some instances, rather narcissistic. And in remote cases, especially if you have the Mars opposite your moon or square the moon, or you have other adverse planets such as Saturn or Pluto in aspect, Pluto, Saturn, or Uranus adversely aspect to the moon. Mother may have been physically, emotionally abusive. So, once again, this is not meant to be an indictment of one's mother, but it is meant to be an indication of what is the core healing that a person needs to explore in regards to these issues. Forgiving one's mother, because if you have a Mars, I have a client who had a Mars square her moon. Her mother was an absolute tyrant, totally argumentative all the time and demanding and authoritarian. And so it's often highlights the possibility that soul may have been a man in prior lifetimes who totally ignored or was not emotionally available in the least, and may have been excessively demanding, angry, temperamental, and inconsiderate. So, as we forgive our mothers, we forgive ourselves. And so we're going to move on here now to talking about Scorpio. So if you have the moon in Scorpio, let's just, I want to be positive as well as talk about the difficult side of things. But if you have the moon in Scorpio, it implies that at a minimum your mother was rather quiet, reserved, deeply attentive and highly emotional when agitated. She may as well have been quite secretive about her feelings, but highly perceptive and maybe even insightful psychologically. And as well was pretty intensely passionate about whatever she was interested in and didn't hide that fact. And was somewhat crisis-oriented or able to manage certain crisis situations. Now, on the other hand, if you have Moon in Scorpio and it's adversely aspected to Mars, Pluto, Saturn, or Uranus, or you have the Moon in any other sign, but it is adversely aspected to Pluto, that implies the mother wound. That implies a mother who may have been a rageaholic, who talked out loud and raged aloud, who had poor boundaries and made excessive emotional outbursts. She may have been manipulative in order to get you to do things. She may have been rather intolerant, and she may have had a serious addiction problem. And that applies to people who have the Mars aspect to the moon as well, adverse. So mother may have been an alcoholic or an addict who did not know how to, in a healthy way, cope with her feelings and needs or have good boundaries. A mother emotionally unavailable with a Pluto aspect or moon in Scorpio and a mother who may have been rather self-absorbed, or it also implies a mother who just was not available. She may have even died in your childhood, or just simply been not available as a constructive parental influence. Or she may have been someone who exhibited resentfulness, vindictiveness, and even in worst case scenario, violence. And she also may have been inappropriate with her sexuality. So now we're going to move on to Capricorn. So when we look at the signs, the most favorable signs for the moon are Cancer and Taurus. So the opposite sign of Taurus is Scorpio. So the opposite sign of the most favorable exalted position of the moon is actually the most difficult position. And the opposite of Cancer is Capricorn. So if you have the moon in Capricorn, or you have the moon aspecting Saturn adversely in a square or an opposition, and I will point out, if you've never had an astrology chart made, you need to contact an astrologer, such as myself. Go to www.altazarastrology.com and have a chart made and have it revealed as to the position of your moon and the aspects or angles of the other planets to your moon, to see to what extent you have the mother wound and have calling for healing and forgiveness along those lines. So, the moon in Capricorn implies a soul who has a predominance of past lifetimes of a preoccupation with social stature, career, and fulfillment through their social stature and position of authority. So, that to the neglect or detriment of more personal, intimate vulnerability or relationships. Now, so when we look at this mother position of the mother who had moon, if you have moon in Capricorn, your mother may have been very career-oriented. She may have been quite reserved, but very attuned to obedience to social and socialite protocols to fit into the society and look good and be upwardly mobile and status conscious. She may have been a dutiful provider and made sure that you looked good, but maybe more to make her look good, that her children were well dressed or dressed stylishly appropriately for the current trends in society, etc. She may have enhanced their children's opportunities for college or training in the arts or other activities, also to some ulterior extent be able to boast about her children and their talents and accomplishments. Now, the mother wound in regards to the Capricorn moon is related to, especially if there's an adverse angle to Saturn or Mars or Pluto or Uranus, a mother may have been rather cold and undemonstrative. She may have been a workaholic and even worked a lot, or just not been around a lot, or you may have been taken care of a lot of time by babysitters or nannies. She may be someone who's a parent that is more like managing a business or a rather controlling, rather than being warm and encouraging. She may have been someone who worried a lot and was rather distrustful of her children and making sure that the children were dressed properly and looked good and had adequate warm clothing. So it could be the smother. Make sure you're always asking you whether you have enough clothes on, are you wearing your galoshes, or do you have your lunch with you? Not trusting you to just have learned how to take care of yourself, but always overly micromanaging. And was into giving you approval for your accomplishments and or structured the home in a certain way, almost like an employment situation with rules and regulations. So this especially is the mother wound related to people with moon in Capricorn or who have the moon in aspect to Saturn. So now we're going to move on to the more favorable signs for the moon. And so we're going to step back and talk about the fact that the favorable signs are associated with the planet Venus, planet of love, the planet of femininity, the planet of sensitivity and receptivity, planet associated with discerning your values and making healthy choices when in good aspect. So let's talk about the moon in Libra, an air sign. So people who have moon in Libra have generally, now again, you could have the moon in Libra but have had it in adverse aspect to Mars, Pluto, Saturn, or Uranus. So that's going to diminish, the favorable karma with the moon in Libra. But otherwise, if you've had reasonably good aspects, generally speaking, the moon in Libra implies a mother who is very sociable, romantic and or artistic in her inclinations. It implies that you've been a soul who has been socially gregarious in prior lifetimes, has been able to evolve a certain degree of empathy and tactfulness and diplomacy in regards to being with others in society and enjoy that fulfilling connection, as well as emotional fulfillment that comes through reading, literature, the arts, music, and or even singing and vocalization. Now, on the other hand, there can be a mother wound to a certain extent with any sign. So the mother wound associated with Libra is often codependency. So when a person is overly sensitive to the expectations of other people, to the extent to which they deny their own needs and is overly seeking other people's approval, as many Libras are just so, gracious and tactful, that can become a kind of codependency where a person is seeking too much approval and approbation and from the outside without a deeper inner sensibility for better boundaries. So, just checking to make sure we've got a connection here. My connection sometimes waffles through the airwaves, but the internet gods are good to us tonight. So the Libra also the moon in Libra mother can have a certain snobbishery or sophisticated approach to fashion and current trends in society that makes for a certain elitism, and also a proclivity to being a little too intellectual and processing feelings through their head and through their verbalization, rather than being conscious of emotional empathy. Also, a mother with a moon, or if you have moon in Libra, your mother may have been obsessed with politics and or societal circumstances that she talked a lot about and maybe was overly verbose in that sense. So now we're going to move on to moon in Taurus. So moon in Taurus is a position that does imply the mother was pragmatic and grounded. This applies to all of the earth signs, and yet moon in Taurus is also associated with Venus, except moon in Taurus implies a mother who is very geared towards a connection with nature, mother who may have loved gardening and or fixing of the interior of the home and wonderful physical adornments of possessions of your furniture and the adornment of the landscape, and as well, nice clothing, nice car, and yet not overly attached to that, and very connected to being environmentally sound and in harmony with nature. The moon in Taurus is considered exalted, so it implies you have a pretty high karma in regards to taking care of your needs and being conscious of your empathy with others and in attunement with nature, and having a friendly disposition. The only negativity associated with the moon in Taurus, if there are adverse aspects of the Mars, Pluto, Saturn, or Uranus, are mother who may have been overly materialistic and not as attuned with nature, status conscious, mother who may have been rather insecure materially and constantly needing to evaluate finances or complain about them. She may have been socially inept and very private and not out much socially, or just more into the pets, the dogs, and the home environment. And on the other hand, she may have been rather flirtatious. And that also applies to Moon in Libra, the two Venus positions. And she may have had a proclivity towards codependency, a kind of self-righteous at being an advice giver to some extent, or overly dependent on accommodating others to the neglect of her own deep needs, and a proclivity towards being boastful. So we're moving on now as where time is of the essence, and the moon in Cancer. So the moon in Cancer is the lunar position. The sign Cancer is ruled by the moon. Whether your sun's in Cancer or the moon in Cancer is very important. And so it implies, and it's in its natural position in the sign Cancer. Cancer is the sign of the crab, the hard shell and soft body. So mother who you had a mother who may have been very sensitive, caring, loving the mothering role, and therefore loving the role of domesticity in terms of cooking, clothing, organizing the home environment, but especially sharing her feelings and reading bedtime stories and encouraging knowing your feelings and being very psychologically aware and sensitive, and being an emotive homemaker, and as well to look at the downside of the mother moon in Cancer is simply smothering, again, the proclivity towards overly doting on your children and not trusting enough the children to have the right clothing on, or having taken their lunch with them in the lunchbox, or overly butting her nose into your friendships, or some of your playful activities. But that's a function of also these Mars, Pluto, Saturn, Uranus aspects to that moon. She also may have been rather self-absorbed emotionally and a pity pot in terms of her own problems, or speaking them aloud inappropriately. So we're now moving on to the position of the moon in Sagittarius. Now this is a different ballpark altogether, whereas these positions of Libra, Taurus, and Cancer are very associated directly with the feminine planets of Venus and the moon in terms of sensitivity and receptivity. Sagittarius is a fire sign. So the fire signs, we've already talked about Aries, which are more masculine energy. But Sagittarius is a higher-minded energy. And so it implies, let's get to the notes on Sagittarius. Ruled by Jupiter, it implies a mother who may have been religious, or at least philosophical in her orientation to life. It implies she may have been somewhat carefree and lighthearted, and been rather open to social cultural explorations, especially other cultures, people, very geared towards encouraging education and higher consciousness. So this may be the higher-minded mother. Not to say that the other moon positions may not have had those with Libra, Taurus, or Cancer, especially if they were aspected to Jupiter or Neptune favorably. But this is a natural inclination and implies you have had many lifetimes of being somewhat high-minded, philosophical, or inclined towards spiritual or cultural consciousness, and or having a strong emphasis on being an educator, or having a kind of ministry in life. And your mother may have been, having that kind of ministry as well, whether it be towards caring for animals at the Humane Society, or out there helping the homeless, or some religious inclinations. The downside of the mother in experience with the moon in Sagittarius is a mother who may have been scattered in her life and overextended with doing too many things to the neglect of her mothering duties. She may have been overly involved in religion, or even had a certain prejudicial favorability towards, or sectarianism in regards to her own religion or race or ethnicity. She may have processed her feelings just philosophically and intellectually, and not really been able to share her feelings in a more personal way. So these are some of the downsides for if you've had adverse aspects to your moon in Sagittarius. Now we're going to move on to the moderate positions of the moon in Gemini or Virgo. So these two positions imply that Mercury is associated with the moon. And so it implies for the two of them that mother may have been very busy and active, not unlike, per se, the Sagittarius, moon in Sagittarius, but the mother definitively processed her feelings through her mind, her intellect. Moon in Gemini definitely encourages communicating and sharing ideas and intellectual development. And so as we focus on Gemini to start with, mother may have been a teacher, she may have been an intellectual, she may have been a salesperson, she may have been someone who's highly talkative, communicative, and sociable, read a lot of books, and may have been rather high-minded too if she had positive aspects to her moon. But she may have also been kind of scattered or engaged in multitude of a variety of activity, including her mothering dynamic. She may have been involved in a lot of social networking in the home, having lots of people over, and or engaging in types of communicative activity out of the home. So the downside of the mother wound related to the moon in Gemini is a mother who was scattered and emotionally unavailable, overly cerebral and intellectualize her needs, and or overly talkative without empathy, gossipy, and or impulsive in her speech, a storyteller, and not necessarily taking into consideration the needs of or the receptivity of people who she is speaking to. Not necessarily interested in homemaking skills, and therefore rather busy and not as involved in the home environment. So that's the downside. Now, the moon in Virgo is a different dynamic. It implies, like all Earth sign moons, the mother who is very pragmatic, possibly nature-oriented, but also much more career-oriented and service-oriented. So moon and Virgo mothers are very orderly and even can be overly critical, but could be neatness freaks. So very much geared towards having the home be very well organized and neat and clean, highly hygienic and conscious of things like nutrition. She may have been a service-oriented professional, like an acupuncturist, a nurse, a chiropractor, or even an auto mechanic. but someone who has pragmatic skills and intellectual development, even an engineer or a computer programmer or a scientist. So this is a mother who also may have really encouraged career development and goal setting in a positive way, and someone who also is very sensitive and receptive to being of service to people in the world, and a good role model that way. However, the downside of the moon in Virgo mother was overly demanding in terms of perfectionism, and not being as patient in terms of skill development or emotional awareness. Critical, overly critical when your behavior didn't match up to her high standards. Nitpicking in terms of neatness and your clothing and your appearance, and maybe how that appeared in terms of social stature and impact on impressions of her. Lacking feeling, cerebral, workaholic, and if you're having fears of intimacy, not displaying emotional availability or intimacy with her partner, and demonstrating a kind of codependency in which her self-worth is very tied to what she does for other people, rather than necessarily being motivated by a joy for what she really enjoys doing. So we're moving on to our conclusion here, the moon in Leo. And so the last fire sign. And people have fire sign moons, again, have characters and personalities for many lifetimes of being active, recreational, assertive, authoritative. And so people with moon in Leo often have come from many lifetimes of authoritative or an artistic, dramatic quality. Many have even had lifetimes of being in royalty or significant positions of notoriety or popularity in society. So they like to be recognized. They like the quality of demonstrating dignity. And so, therefore, one's mother may have been a drama queen, and we'll come back to notes in this regard. Mother may have been rather commanding or overly dramatic in how she presented her life and or doing activities. She may have been just very playful, and some moon in people have moon in Leo have had mothers who are very adept at being with children and have a natural inner child expression of their own nature. Also romantic and demonstrating the joy of being in relationship with their significant other, and having a certain pride in their children and showing that by taking a deep interest in cultivating their children's intellect or their creative abilities. So the mother moon related to moon in Leo is a mother who may have been overly domineering, authoritarian, self-absorbed and narcissistic, show-off, using her children more for her own sense of ego, boastfulness, or supporting her parental image. And so we're now going to conclude with looking at the moon in these other positions that we haven't talked about, the moon in Pisces and the moon in Aquarius. So moon in Pisces mothers have been mothers who have been sensitive and caring and compassionate and often deeply spiritual or mystical and or artistic and creative. So this is the positive mother, a mother who is very conscientious yet somewhat shy and not very much out there in society, but definitely demonstrating a sensitivity of spirituality, creativity, and compassion. On the other hand, if there's adverse aspects, especially to Neptune, or Mars, Pluto, Saturn, or Uranus. This can be the mother who was highly emotional and overly sensitive, to the extent to which she, was just like overly overwhelmed with life's problems and not able to be a functional parent a lot of the time. She may have been a hypochondriac or had a lot of illness issues, and therefore not be available, or even trying to evoke the child's sympathy for all her problems. Worst case scenario, Pisces relates to escapism. So with her inability to cope with the mothering role or the mothering responsibilities, she may have engaged in alcoholism, drug use, and or other addictions. She also may have been seriously codependent in terms of just overly sacrificing herself for her neighbors or other people's problems or her relatives, and to the neglect of her own needs or even her own family. She may have even been overly compassionate in terms of caring for animals or the homeless, to the neglect of her family. She may have been engaged in a self-pity pot, a doormat with poor boundaries. So I want to fit in all the signs here. So lastly, if you have the moon in Aquarius, an air sign. So the higher side of the mother who you may have had, if you have moon in Aquarius, is, and you may have been very likely in many lifetimes, a social humanitarian activist, someone who also was evolved in terms of your intellectual ability and communicative skills, scientifically oriented or geared towards community, collectivity, and humanitarianism. And your mother may have exhibited those qualities as well. She may have been rather a progressive, liberal, bohemian, a rebel, or scientific, certainly a progressive, or at least rebellious and nonconformist. She may have been counterculture, metaphysical, and or artistic, and or politically radical. Now, in terms of the mother wound with the mother moon in Aquarius, especially if you have the moon adversely aspected to Mars, Pluto, or Saturn, or Uranus, especially Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, it implies that your mother may have been overly preoccupied with society or activism, humanitarianism, may have dragged you to demonstrations and political events that may have been rather inappropriate for you as a child, or you didn't understand, and or she felt more of a calling and an emphasis for her impact on society, and not realizing the importance of her deeper emotional responsibilities to nurturing your sense of security and well-being. She may have been erratic in her parenting duties, so there 1 minute, gone the next. She may have been involved in her work and an obsession with the discoveries or the progressive impact that her work may have on society, and have more of a passion for that than a consideration for you and your well-being. And so she is now, so in that sense, there's an abandonment dynamic associated with the moon in Aquarius. So this also, mother may have been an escapist as well, demanding excessive amount of freedom for herself and her lifestyle, to the neglect of her mothering responsibilities. And also may have had a proclivity towards trying to indoctrinate her children into an ideological point of view, whether it be conservatism or liberalism or religious dogmatism, that may have been inappropriate for the child to be more relaxed in being able to make their own choice for their ideology into their adult lifetime. So this concludes our perspective on all the different signs. It will be helpful in the future when I do webinars that I can have an interactive experience with people here, so that I know what your chart is or your moon position, and I can hone in on focusing directly and specifically on your moon and your experience with your mother, and the symbolism associated with healing in regards to your moon position. For those who want to see this video again, it'll be available on my YouTube channel, Altazar Astrology. And as well, if you would like further information about your own chart and your moon position, as well as the aspects and angles of the other planets to your moon, you're welcome to contact me. You can go to my website, www.altazarastrology.com, where there's my email and contact information. So thank you all for being here. I would like to just simply conclude by saying that we are all here to forgive our mothers and attune with the higher divine mother, and find your divine mother as a way to gain access more deeply to your emotional body, your feelings and needs, because this Aquarian age, as it's starting right now, is about not skipping the step, not jumping from being part of the material world to just doing meditation and studying spiritual literature, but it's about healing the emotional body and engaging in community and loving people and understanding how to relate to, in a loving way, to people in our world. And so that includes forgiving our mothers, healing and understanding and getting out of denial about our moon position and our karma related to emotional empathy, and our own self-care, personal self-care, and finding a connection with a divine mother, whether it be divine Kuan Yin through the Buddhist path, or divine Mother Mary through the Christian path, or in the Hindu Durga, Kali, and the Lakshmi, as well as in the other divine paths that relate to the feminine sensibilities and sensitivities. So namaste.